Hey guys, this is Cece, and I'm with the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We're going to be showcasing something a little bit unique today. We're going to be showcasing the Author's Corner, Meet the Author. We have a fabulous author here with us today, but we're also going to showcase our brand new show, which is going to be starting here soon, and that is the Veterans Corner. It's a Going Solo Veterans Corner. We have our wonderful host here that's going to join me today with interviewing our terrific author here today. So those of you that don't know me, I'm Cece Shatz. I'm the doyen of relationship building. And what I do is really connect you with some awesome people, helping move you through to really living your best life. And our authors are truly the best around. And we have an elite guest with us here today, which I'm very, very excited. All of his information is right there on goingsolomedia.com. And just a little homework before we start. Of course, you guys know you can comment, share, like, all of that stuff, just so that we make sure all of our information gets out and that we know we're really giving you the information that you'd like to listen to. So please do that for us. We would appreciate it. So let's not waste any more time. We've got the guys here in the gallery waiting for us. I'm going to bring them up here. So we've got our wonderful guest here today. Let's see if we can bring him up. There we go. We got that. We got all the guys up here. So let's introduce all of the guys to you here so you guys know what's going on. We have our wonderful guest. I'd like to introduce him. He wrote this terrific book, and Steve Snyder is wonderful. He wrote this awesome book regarding his dad, who is it's a true story. It's called Shot Down. He was a pilot. His dad's name is Howard Snyder, and the crew of B-17 Susan Ruth and he's from Seal Beach, California. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Cece.
It's great having you. Now, you're also the past president of the 306 Bomb. It's a bomb group, historical association.
That's correct.
Wow, that's very, very impressive. So I want to thank you so much for your service and all of that. We just so appreciate it. We truly do. So not only you and your father. So we're going to get to know the book here in just a few minutes and kind of your journey on writing it. And I'm excited to find out a little bit more about that. But let me introduce you to our brand new host here. That's Paul Holbert. And his information, I'll just want to show you guys here what it is. He's going to be our host of our new show, which is called Going Solo Veterans. He is an author of his new and the latest book is Term Limits. And of course, you guys can find him right there on his website, which we posted. And he's a literary vet. And and that's spelled, if you guys want to write it down, it's spelled LITERARYVET. And of course, that's his website too, .net. And so we want to make sure you guys have that. So welcome to the show, Paul. This is your first time joining us, so welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Cece. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity to seeing how you operate here and to see what Steve can share with us as well, especially being a veteran myself. I really am interested to see what his story's like.
Yeah, it's wonderful having you. Now, don't take any, you don't have to do anything that I do. So all the bad things I do, don't pick them up. So anyhow, but Steve, let's get on to your book because I'm very, very excited about sharing with our audience, not only the book, but your journey of writing it. So tell us why, of course, your dad was a pretty awesome person, and what he's experienced and all of the, all the crew there on the B-17. So tell us about the journey of you really trying, to determining this is what you want to do. You want to bring this story alive. So share with us your journey.
Sure. Well, growing up, I knew the basics of my dad's World War II history. I knew he was a B-17 pilot. He was stationed in England with the 8th Air Force. His plane was named the Susan Ruth after my oldest sister, who was 1 year old at the time that he went overseas. He flew bombing missions over Europe, and on February 8th of 1944, his plane was shot down over Belgium. And after he bailed out, he was missing in action for 7 months, but he evaded capture and eventually made it back to England. But it wasn't until I retired from my career job in 2009 that I really had the time to delve into my dad's war history in more detail. And at that time, I had no intention of writing a book whatsoever. My parents had kept a lot of material from the war years, and I just wanted to go through all that and kind of organize it and learn more. And there were two items that were really significant. One was a diary that my dad wrote while he was missing in action about his plane being shot down. That's absolutely riveting, which is in the book. And the other item were all the letters that my dad had written to my mother while he was stationed in England. And my dad was very candid in the letters that he wrote to my mother. He talks about what bombing missions were like, what life was like on the airfield in England, what life was like in London and England at the time, escapades of him and his crew. And I just became fascinated with the story of my dad and his crew, and it became my passion. And so I started reading book after book about the air war over Europe. I went on the internet and spent countless hours doing research, downloading declassified military documents. I went on a quest to find relatives of all of my dad's crew members. B-17 had a 10-man crew. And I was successful in doing that. And I asked them for any information they could give me, newspaper articles, pictures, letters. I joined a number of World War II organizations, started going to reunions, listening to veterans tell their stories. And finally, 3 years into this, I just came to the conclusion that the story of my dad and his crew was so unique and so compelling that people needed to know about it and read about it. So I decided to write a book. The book was published in 2014, and it's changed my life, basically, after writing that book.
Well, very inspirational because, learning about our past, learning about something that happened, we have no idea. I would have no idea of what happened in your dad's era and what he went through, and being able to, experience that and sharing that with everyone is pretty awesome. So how long was that process again that took you to write the book itself? It was
from the time I started my research to the time the book was published was 4.5 years. And I actually published the book independently by forming a one-person limited liability company. I formed my own publishing company called Sea Breeze Publishing, which is the name of the street that I live on in Seal Beach. And then I contracted with independent professionals for all the associated services, such as editing, cover design, interior layout, printing the book, and fulfillment. And it really took me on quite a journey, since I had, after I finished the manuscript, I had no idea then how to get the book printed. And I looked into various forms of how to do that. And I decided just forming my own publishing company was the best for me, which is the most complicated way to do it and probably more expensive, but I felt that just fit my needs better. And as I mentioned, it's changed my life. I went from just a retiree taking long walks and naps and reading books to now it's basically a full-time job. I travel all over the United States. Well, not right now. Attending air shows, signing copies of the book. I do a lot of speaking to all sorts of different organizations. I on social media for hours every day promoting the book. And as I said, it's changed my life and been the really rewarding experience.
I can imagine. I totally can imagine. It not only is it just a wonderful tribute to your father and those that were in the service with him, right there so I am curious about something I wanted to ask you, though. It just popped into my mind, is how was he able to name the plane? He was able to create the name of the plane. So I always thought the names of planes were just something that they were given, but he was able to actually name the plane himself, huh?
Yes, well, he was the first pilot of the crew, and as such, he was the commander of both the plane and the crew. So the pilot had the last say on what a plane would be named. Of the 10 man crew, 3 of the 10 were married. But my dad was the only crew member that had a child. And so I guess just that by process of elimination, it just came to be that he wanted to name his plane after his 1-year-old daughter, and the rest of the crew were happy to do that. So that's how that. It's interesting also about naming the planes, and also what was painted on the planes called nose art. The Air Force was the only entity that allowed their planes to be painted. The Marines didn't, the Navy didn't, nor did other countries. But the Air Force thought it would help the morale of these young guys, of these combat crews, if they could personalize their planes and name them and paint them. And they were very creative in what they named and painted on their planes. Many times it was a cartoon character, but more often than not, it was a scantily clad or nude women. Because they have to remember that these air crews were made up of guys, these young guys in their late teens and early 20s. Mm-hmm. They were virile young men, and they missed the female companionship of those back home.
Yeah, so they put it on their planes. That's very interesting. Paul, do you have any questions or any comments?
Well, I was just going to say, it was to kind of add on to what Steve said about the young men flying the planes and the various pictures they used to put on the front. And it's probably the reason why Paul Tibbets, who flew the plane that dropped the atomic bomb into Japan, named it after his mother, but didn't have a picture on it, only her name.
Yeah.
Right. It's interesting, Paul, that my dad's flight engineer was named Roy Holbert. So one of our crew members had this has your last name. I don't know if you go back, there's any relationship there, but he was one of the 10
I'd have to check that out. That would be interesting. I might take a look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that something? It is amazing because there's so many people that are associated with the service. And so there's just a tremendous amount. So as we're growing up, and that's why I kind of named our show today, Our History Shapes Us and the USA, because it most certainly does, because, as we evolve and throughout our, the time of service, so many people are in service, when it was a time of need there. And so, that's our history. Our families were all there. I have my dad, of course, and then my uncle and my uncle's uncles. And I mean, they've all had a run in the service, and my son, of course. So it's amazing how, our service individuals today, how they really shape our world, our in the USA here. So it's amazing. And then, of course, our time of crisis now with the coronavirus, all of that the service is doing to help us. So yeah, so we want to really commend them for that. So, all right, so this is really in a unique. Oh, we do have a comment here. Let's see. Oh, here's. So Sally wrote, "Thank you, Sally, for commenting. We appreciate that. Thank you for your service." So that's wonderful. So we do have listeners that are listening to this on the show, so we do appreciate that. So, these stories that you put together with regards to your father's experiences and the letters and all of that. So, were you able to go back into the helping going back into the families of the men that were on the plane, also on the in his crew?
Yes. Also, the book's just not about my dad, but it's about what happened to each member of the crew, because something different happened to each man. Of the 10-man crew, 5 of them made it back home, but 5 of them did not. Mm-hmm. And it's also about all the Belgian people that risked their lives trying to help them. The first half of the book kind of builds up to the day that the plane was shot down, and then the second half of the book's all about what happened afterwards. And it's all based on firsthand testimony by the people who were involved in the story, either members of the crew that survived, members of the Belgium underground, I even located a German Luftwaffe pilot that shot down my dad's plane and interviewed him for the book.
Wow.
But I probably wouldn't have written the book if it wasn't for two Belgian gentlemen. Their names are Dr. Paul Delahaye and Jacques Lelot. And they were young boys during the war and greatly affected by it. They saw firsthand the atrocities committed against family and friends by the Nazis. And later in life, they became local historians, and they interviewed all these Belgian people and members of the Belgium underground about events that took place involving my dad and his crew, and they documented their testimony. And they gave me unbelievably detailed information about events that would have been lost forever without their research. So I owe them a huge debt. Dr. Delahaye passed away in 2013 at 82 years old. Jacques is still with us and a dear friend of mine. So I really owe them a huge debt. So really the story itself, and the book's kind of two types of books into one. One's the story of what took place, and then the other is what I added, and that's a great deal of historical information and anecdotes about and surrounding the war to put it into context.
That's amazing. And so when you're doing your research for that, what is there a particular, how did you get your information? Did you get through like libraries, or of course, you probably went back through some of the documentation, of course, that you had with the names and all of that. So how were you able to reach out? Did you use social media? How did you able to reach out to some of those individuals to be able to get different stories of their lives?
Of course, without the internet, I would have been very handicapped in contacting all these relatives to get information for me, or to find that German Luftwaffe pilot whose name is Hans Berger. And actually, Hans is the only person from the story that's still with us today. He lives in Munich, Germany. He's 96 years old. We've become very good friends. But my dad had left quite a bit of information. And my first trip to Belgium, I've been to Belgium 6 times, was with my parents. And a lot of the houses that my dad was hidden in and farms are still there today. And so my first trip was in 1994, at the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Belgium and of my dad's plane being shot down. And going over there, accompanying my parents and seeing all these places firsthand really made it personal for me. So from what my dad told me, what other members of the crew either communicated in interviews or wrote down in written accounts or kind of little diaries or histories, and then all that information about from the Belgian people that were involved in the story, declassified military documents, war crimes reports. I am so fortunate and blessed that I had so much information at my disposal. Most people know very little about their World War II veteran, whether it's a grandfather or father. But I know an amazing amount of information and detail, extreme detail about what happened, not only to my dad, but other members of the crew, so that I was able to, put it all into a book. My biggest challenge in writing the book was just how to organize all that, so the story flowed and was readable, to people who would read the story. So it was an amazing experience, and that's another reason why I wrote the book, is because I had so much information to add to the book. I have lots of letters, not only from my dad that he had written to my mother, but members of the crew or members of the family of the crew, and excerpts from those letters are in the book that make it very personal. And also in the print book, there's over 200 time period photographs, so you can visualize everything that you're reading about. Many of those photographs were either sent to my dad from helpers, people that hid him during the war, or that were provided to me by Jacques Lelot or Dr. Delahaye.
That's just marvelous. It truly is, don't you think, Paul? I mean, it's just outstanding, because and we don't realize how important, keeping our pictures and keeping, things, and keeping it organized and keeping the letters and all of those things, what a difference it can make for the people that, that come down, in our family line. And so your father was a very unique person to be able to, organize and keep this stuff, along with your mom, I'm sure, because she kept the letters and she kept some of those things, but to keep a lot of that stuff, because a lot of the guys, when I was talking to some of them, it's like some of them want to keep the things and the others don't. The others just try to, it's memories that's not pleasant, and so they just want to, they want to try to put that behind them. I mean, my father was kind of one of those. He just kind of wanted to put all kind of that stuff behind. So and now, he being 87, he comes and talks about it more and more, about some of his experiences, the joyful ones, and funny and things like that. So it's it's great. I mean, I think we're living in the moment. We don't realize how valuable it is to share that information and keep that so that we can pass it down with those that we love, to be able to bring it forward. So I think it's a very unique book. I think it's pretty cool, to be able to, some of the things, I'm sure, but, are difficult, but to look, I mean, being shot down, it's not a pleasant experience, but it's, being able to share that experience with us is truly, not only fascinating, I hate to say, but it's just touching. It truly is touching. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Cece, I was just going to say, Steve, I kind of really appreciate your story and what you've done, because I had just a very similar experience, in that my father, when I was 5, was killed on active duty in an Army training accident. So I didn't know him very well, but it was that particular instant in my life that later on, when I grew up, prompted me to join the military, just out of curiosity because of my father. And when I first joined in 1981, all those years ago, I had no idea what I was going to do or how long I was going to stay in. So it was more, how can I say, a tribute or a curiosity because of my father. And then there I was, 21 years later, I finally retired. So, I can understand your curiosity about wanting to find out, what your father did. It kind of sparked my curiosity to join the military because of what happened to my father. So, I can understand that and appreciate it.
Yeah, Cece, as you mentioned, your dad didn't talk about things. Most World War II veterans didn't or don't talk about the war. They were an amazing group of men, and they just looked at it like, well, we had a job to do. We went over there, we did our job like everyone else, and then we came back home and got on with our lives. Like, we're no heroes. We did what we had to do, and that's the way they are. And they, without a doubt, they're the greatest generation in my mind. Yeah,
my dad was in the Korean War. He was in the Korean War. And he also flew a plane when they realized that he knew how to fly. And so some of the things that they would give him, the jobs that they would give him to do, he thought there would be better. And so he's okay, I'll do it, and then he finds out, oh, wait a minute, they're shooting at me. Flying over this is that, I guess he had to fly over and take pictures. He thought, oh, that'd be easy enough. I just fly over. I've flown a plane at my grandfather's, Michigan cornfields, so he could do that. But then when he realized, wait, they're shooting at me down here, this isn't such a great experience. And so when you hear those kind of stories, you're like, it's a different world. I mean, you just, you see it in the movies, right? But when you hear it from your family members, or you read it in the letters that were left behind, and some of the stories that I'm sure some of the family members might have shared, that their families had shared, it really becomes very, very real, very, it's just just amazing, isn't it? I mean,
oh yeah, what those guys did is incredible. The men who flew combat missions in the 8th Air Force were amazingly brave. There were 26,000 men that were killed while serving in the 8th Air Force during World War II, which is more than the entire Marine Corps fighting in the Pacific. And another 28,000 men became prisoners of war after their planes were knocked out of the sky by either German anti-aircraft fire or German fighter planes. Being a combat crewman in the 8th Air Force during World War II was the most dangerous duty assignment in the United States military. You know, those guys went back up day after day, not knowing if, you know, that mission would be their last. You know, fellow crewmen, you know, being killed, empty bunks when they came back, but they kept answering the call.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember my father saying the same thing. It's like they would fly out and you don't know how many's coming back, you know, maybe only 1 or 2, you know, would come back. And it's, yeah, he said it's quite an emotional experience, you know, for them to be able to do that, to lose friends each time, each mission. Yeah. And just get up and do it again. Yeah. Because they're asked to do. Yeah, it's truly amazing. It truly is. Well, I hate to take a break, but we're going to have to do that. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about, you know, you writing the book, because I think it's very inspirational. Not only the book itself, but also your journey of writing the book, because you did a lot of work in order to be able to bring such a wonderful book forward to us. And I think that can be very inspiring for those out there that are thinking, you know, maybe I have a story that I'd like to share with the world, you know, and so we'd like to be able to embrace that and inspire those to be able to do that. And talk a little bit more about your publishing company. I don't know if you're still doing that, if you publish other books. So let's talk about that when we get back, okay? So we're going to do a really quick break here, everyone. So I hope that you guys are enjoying WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We are actually the #1 singles network, and we're very proud of that. Our website is goingsolomedia.com. You will find many of our elite guests along with Steve Snyder right there on our website. All of his information is there. And also there's a little link to buy the book. So we hope that you'll do that. So we want to embrace that. So if you guys will bear with us, we're going to have a quick break and we'll be right back. Okay, I want to thank you guys very much. I want to thank our, what do we got going on here? We having this? There we go. We got to get this hand down. We'll get it down eventually. We'll get it done. But also, before we start back with our show, I'd like to be able to share with you guys, we have a wonderful a wonderful sponsor on our show, and I'd like to be able to bring the information up. It's Questfine Jewelers. They're in Fairfax, Virginia, so we want to appreciate them for sponsoring our show. And they're going to be the sponsor for the Going Solo Veterans Corner show, so we're really excited about that. We're excited to be able to help our veterans and be able to get information out. So their number is 877-860-0826, and they're right there at 84 431 Lee Highway in Fairfax, Virginia. So we want to thank them so much for sponsoring the show. Thank them for the lovely video to be able to share that with you. And we hope that you will stop in and say, hey, thank you for supporting WGSN-DB Going Solo Network and our veterans out there. So thank you again. Let's get on back to the show. We've got a lot of stuff happening here today with us. We have a wonderful author, and he has authored this wonderful book called Shot Down. It's a true story of the pilot, his father, which is Howard Snyder, and the crew of the B-17 Susan Ruth and he's all the way from Seal Beach, California. And so we want to welcome back to our show. And we really, truly appreciate Steve Snyder for being with us. Steve, now you were the past president of the 306th Bomb Group Historical Association. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the 306 Bomb Group was the bomb group that my dad was in during the war. There were about, at its peak, 40 different bomb groups in the 8th Air Force that were stationed in England during World War II. And so my dad was in the 306, based at Thurley, England, which is about 60 miles north of London. And I got involved in the association, and I'm still on the board of directors and past president. We have annual reunions of every year to honor and remember those men who served.
Oh, that's wonderful. I was going to ask you about that because I've never heard of that before, a bomb group. What, and of course I realized it had something to do with, the service. But so how many people would you say is in this 306th Bomb Group Historical Association? So that's a group of people that want to, all right, so tell us, number one, how many people and what exactly do they do in this group?
Well, originally it was a veterans association or a veterans group. It was formed by Russell Strong, who was a navigator in the 306 Bomb Group. After the war, he became kind of the historian of the 306 Bomb Group and started the association, and they had reunions. So the various veterans of the 306 would get together and, rekindle friendships and exchange stories and so forth. But now, as time has gone on, most of those veterans are no longer with us anymore. And so instead of a veterans organization, it's become more of a historical association. We still have a few veterans that come to our reunions, but most of the group is made up of second generation or third generation, sons and daughters or grandkids or just people interested in the 306 Bomb Group. At our annual reunions, we probably have 120 of the members or so attend. Mm-hmm. We put out a newsletter twice a year called Echoes. It goes out to probably about 300 people about various articles and things that have happened and historical articles and things like that. And a number of the bomb groups similar to the 306 that were in the 8th Air Force do this as well. And basically it's our mission is to remember the air war over Europe, to honor the men who fought it, and to educate the public about it, especially the younger generations. And that's really why I do what I do. As it's 75 years since the war in Europe ended, and it's fading in people's memory. And we can't let that happen. We have to keep the memory alive and educate the public about what those men did to preserve all the freedoms that we enjoy today.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Now, y'all, we have Paul Holbert here with us. He is the host of Going Solo Veterans Corner, which is a new show that's starting. So thank you again, Paul, for coming on the show here with us today. So tell, Paul, do you have any questions or anything like that that you want to share with Steve here today?
Well, I wanted to share one thing, especially what Steve said, how important it is not to forget what all these people did. And it's an interesting note because I work, while I live in Northern Virginia, I work in downtown DC. And on occasion, I have an opportunity to see one of those World War II vets, and albeit most of the time they're in wheelchairs and they're with their family. And so whenever I do see one, I always make it, I make it my particular goal to go over and speak to them, because it is important, like Steve said, to make sure that they're not forgotten, the things that they did and the sacrifices they made, because the younger generations really are not aware. So many people today are not, the younger folks are not interested in history like maybe some of us were. And definitely you can tell the way Steve is excited about what he's doing. So that's definitely the important point, that, we've got to make sure that we don't forget. But Steve, I did want to ask you, just going back for a moment to when your father's plane was shot down. How many missions had they been on? Were they anywhere close to that 25 mission yardstick that they usually used, or were they still a ways from that before they were able to get to that mark?
Oh, very good question, Paul. Kind of a little history, though. The first mission that the 8th Air Force flew was on August 17th of 1942. And initially, there weren't any mission limits. But in 1943, the morale of these combat crews was really going into the tank, because they realized that they were never going to make it home. They were either going to be killed or they'd be shot down and become prisoners of war. And in the spring of 1943, the flight surgeon of the 306 bomb group, Dr. Thurman Schuler, realized this, and he sent a letter to Ira Eaker, who was the commander of the 8th Air Force, saying that we need to implement a mission limit. He suggested 20, but Eaker set it at 25. But at least these combat crews had, some goal that they could try to reach, and a light at the end of the tunnel, that if they reached those 25 missions, they could go back home. It's interesting to note, though, that in 1943, when the 8th Air Force was taking devastating losses, that it was statistically impossible to complete 25 missions. The average number of missions flown in 1943 before being shot down was only 6. My dad and his, going back to answer to your question, my dad was shot down on his 8th mission. Of his 10-man crew, some of his crew had more missions than he did, and some had less. My dad was the center on the basketball team, and he tore the ligaments in his ankle, and he couldn't fly for a couple months. So some of his crew had more missions, but then other crew members had fewer, because some of them had been injured on combat missions, and some of them were sick. With that damp, cold weather in England, guys were getting sick and getting the flu and getting pneumonia all the time. So they were, hospitalized, and so they missed a lot of missions. Now, a lot of people think that a crew, they flew all their missions together, but that was rarely the case, because either they had injured crew members or ill crew members. Actually, my dad only flew 2 missions with his full crew. The last mission on February 8th that they were shot down, and then the mission before that. The mission limit was gradually raised even higher than 25 later in the war, when Jimmy Doolittle took over as commander of the 8th Air Force in January of 1944. He eventually raised it to 30 and then to 35. Because the missions, well, I shouldn't say, they were still plenty dangerous. But in 1944, the Luftwaffe was basically pretty much wiped out by the 8th Air Force, particularly the P-51 Mustangs. So those, after, say, D-Day, June 6th of 44, the combat crews still had to deal with that heavy anti-aircraft fire, but they no longer had to really worry about the German fighters. So anyway, my dad, that's a long story, winded way to answer your question, but my dad, it was his 8th mission.
Oh, that's very fascinating. I had no idea that they even had that. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
So
the Germans had no mission limits. They just flew until they died. So most of the experienced Luftwaffe pilots were killed. Hans Berger, um, almost all of his friends were killed in the war, and Hans was shot down 3 times, but he luckily made it through the war.
it's just amazing. It's a wonderful book, and I want to thank you so much for sharing that with us today. So I wanted to ask you with regards to inspiring other people to, write their journey, write their story, write their family's journey. So to embark on that, is there any words that you would like to share with those out there that are thinking about doing something like that?
Sure. Well, to begin with, I had no writing background or training whatsoever. I always kind of liked to write. I was in sales and sales management, and I like to write marketing materials and in different things during my career. So that just points out that I had no professional background in writing, and the book's become it has a 5-star reader review rating on Amazon, and it's won almost 30 book awards in the time that it's been published. And if you have a story to share, you should write it down. And there's lots of ways to publish independently these days. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the route I took was a more complicated and expensive route.
Yeah.
But there's lots of avenues where you can just load your manuscript at different internet sites, and then they'll publish your book for you. It's called print on demand. So you don't have to, print a bunch of books and incur the expense for that. You can just print as many as are necessary. So there's lots of tools out there for people who have a story, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, where you can publish a book. I mean, I was really passionate about this, and I thought it was such an amazing story that I felt pretty confident that it would be interesting to readers. Unless you're a celebrity or a really well-known person, exposure is your big problem as an independent and author. If you're famous, all you have to do is publish a book, and then all the media, the radio, the TV, the newspapers spread it all over the world, and sell millions of copies. But if you're an unknown person, like most of us are, the big challenge is trying to get exposure. If you want to try to get your book out there so people know about it, because no matter how good a book is, unless people know about it, they're not going to. It's not read.
Absolutely. Now I have your website up here and your email again. Can we find the book on your website? Do you sell it through your website too?
Yeah, actually, if someone wants an autograph, a personally signed book, they can go to my website, and on the homepage there's a little buy now button where you can pay by credit card, and then I'll sign it to personally sign it to however the person wants me to, and then they can pay by credit card, and then I mail it to them. So a lot of books are sold that way. Most people buy the book on Amazon because well over 50% of all books sold are sold on Amazon.
Yeah. But you know what? It makes a nice gift. Your book would be a very nice gift, and have it have you with your autograph on it would be awesome. It would be a very nice gift for someone. So anyone thinking about if holidays or whatever, if you do things in advance, this would be an awesome book to give someone. So definitely do that. So it's Steve, Steve, Snyder, SNYDER, author, AUTHORN.com. So that's his website. So you can go on there and just buy it, get him to do the signature and send it to someone you love. That would be a great gift. Wonderful gift.
And also, it's available as a print book, both hardcover and paperback, also in all ebook formats, Kindle or Nook or what have you, and also even as an audio book, but there's no pictures in the audio book.
Yeah. See, I think having the pictures would be awesome. It'd be great, and I don't know if they do it anymore now, but the coffee table books, we like the coffee table books, remember? So it would be a nice book to put on your coffee table. So yeah, so it would be
Hey,
great.
Steve.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say you'd spoken a lot about your father and his experiences, and one thing that I'm sure you don't forget about, but a lot of people do, is how did the rest of your family deal with his experiences and his situation? For instance, like your mom, I'm sure it was a struggle for her. I'm sure it was a stressful time for her. And so how did your family come through all that?
Another good question, Paul. It was really hard on my mother because not only did she have Susan Ruth, a 1-year-old little baby girl, but my other sister, Nancy, was born while my dad was missing in action. And as I mentioned, my dad was missing in action for 7 months. So here she was back in Pasadena, California, with a 1-year-old girl, an infant baby, and not knowing if she'd ever see her husband again. After the plane was shot down, she got a telegram from the War Department saying that her husband was missing in action. And that's all she knew until my dad got back to England and then sent her a telegram in later September of '44, where he said he was fit as a fiddle and banked the money, honey, because he had all that back pay from those 7 months while he was missing in action. So that obviously that was a glorious day for my mother and all, my dad's parents and the relatives back home. I didn't come along until a couple of years after the war.
That was a heck of a way to earn a bankroll, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. That was really hard on the families of the crew. And as I alluded to earlier, some of the excerpts of the letters that the family members exchanged after the plane went down, whether they're mothers or wives or sweethearts, writing to each other, for moral support and praying for their safety in return, not knowing what happened to them, are very moving letters that are in the book. And, some of those people had happy results when half of the crew came back home, and other of the families, had tragic results when 5 of those crew members did not return.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing that the journey and the story and all of it is truly amazing, and one that just thinking about it again, it's one that needs to be heard. It needs to be shared with everyone. And it needs to not be forgotten, so it's not only what all they went through, but the reason why they went through it. And so it's just very touching. So thank you so much. We truly appreciate you being on the show here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Just to give a little teaser to people out there. After my dad bailed out, as I said, he was missing in action for 7 months. For the majority of the time, he was hidden by various Belgian people that hid him from the Germans. And he almost got discovered several times that are described in the book. And then finally, he got tired of hiding. And so he joined the French resistance called the Maquis, and he started fighting against the Germans, sabotaging German convoys. And a number of encounters that the French resistance group he was with had with the Germans are in the book. And then finally, after one day, word came that there were U.S. troops in a nearby village of Trélon, France. And he walked into the village and identified himself. And then that's how he got back to England. So not only was he had the danger of being hidden for months with the Germans looking for him, but he even decided to get back into the fight and fight with the French resistance was an amazing, brave, and courageous thing to do.
Yeah, your father is definitely a very unique individual indeed. So just an amazing person, and what an awesome representation of the United States. I mean, think about him being able to not only, service here, he's protecting us in all ways possible. So that's just amazing. It truly is. Truly is. So yeah, it's great. Well, we're going to have to close the show. I hate to do that because it's so interesting, and I think we could keep you on here and just go from each chapter to chapter would be awesome, and go through each book. But we want to buy the book, so I hope that you guys will support the veterans here on our station. And of course, Steve Snyder is the author of a wonderful book. Again, it's called Shot Down, so we'll show his information here. It's called Shot Down. It's a true story of a pilot, Howard Snyder, which is his father, and the crew of the B-17 Susan Ruth. And we want to thank you so much for sharing the journey a little bit here with us and giving us the teasers so that we'll purchase the book and learn a lot more, because I think there's a lot more information there, not only of your father, but also of those in the crew. So I think it's very, very fascinating. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Cece. I appreciate it very much. Nice meeting you, Paul. Good luck with your new venture.
Thank you.
Everyone,
looking forward to it.
Everyone stay safe.
Yes, you too. You too, definitely. And we'll hopefully have you back on again, maybe chat a little bit more. It would be nice to be able to bring you forward. So thank you so much for being one of our elite guests. We do appreciate it. And again, all of our information about Steve Snyder is right there on our website, GoingSoloMedia.com. And we want to thank you all for listening. So again, this is WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. And we are listening to the Author's Corner, Meet the Author, with our wonderful author here today, Steve Snyder, with his terrific book, Shot Down. So I hope you guys will purchase that. And if you want to get an autograph copy, just go to our website, and all of his information is right there, and he'll sign it for you. And it's something, a great gift. It would be a wonderful gift to give someone, and maybe one for yourself would be great. So we want you guys to do that. And I want to thank again Paul Holbert for being on the show here with us. He's going to be our host for the new show, which is called Going Solo Veterans Corner. And we'll try to twist Steve's arm to get him to come back on and talk to Paul a little bit further about it. And I think that would be great. Again, we want to thank our wonderful sponsors today, Quest Fine Jewelers. They're really terrific people. They're supporting us, just along the way, and we want to thank them so much for that. It's Quest Fine Jewelers. You can reach them at 877-860-0826. Their address is 8431 Lee Highway, Fairfax, Virginia. We want to thank them so much. We've got, if you want to know some more information, we've got a wonderful video right on our YouTube channel that we shared here during our break. But just go and do a shout out and say hi to them when it's safe after the coronavirus. So we hope that you guys do that. Okay, we got to go. We love you. We hope we'll catch you right here back here, same time, same place next week. Bye for now.